Steeler Fury. SteelPerch.com.
Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of your Pittsburgh Steelers show on the SteelPerch.com podcast. I'm your host, Bradshaw DeBen, a.k.a. Wil Masisak. Also might know me as Accidental Zen on Twitter. Those of us at SteelPerch.com bring you this podcast every week about the Pittsburgh Steelers and a little bit of NFL and college football. And with me, as always, to do that is my co-host with the co-most. He's in freezing South Carolina. His name is Dom. He goes by FC. He's with us. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. I really didn't bitch about it being cold, but it is a little bit cold down here.
Yeah, well, like I said, you're not really prepared for being cold at all when you're down there. That's the way that works.
Right. I mean, I have to be very descriptive of this. I haven't worn long pants in like 18 months. Now, that doesn't mean I'm walking around bare-ass naked like Donald Duck down there, but, shorts and various forms of sandals have been worn for a while, or tennis shoes, and I'm about to break out the big boy clothes and some pants, like 40 degrees.
Big boy clothes. Boy, that's going to be rough for you. I feel bad. I feel bad already. Just hearing about it from you. But what I don't feel bad about is we have a Pittsburgh Steelers team that's won 3 games in a row, which a month ago didn't seem like that was really going to be possible. I'm feeling a little better about the Pittsburgh Steelers than I was a month ago. What exactly gives you the most optimism about where they're at right now as they move into the halfway point of the season?
The front seven is going to be really, really good if and when Tua comes back and he is close to what he was. Mika Fitzpatrick over the last month, his level of play is greatly improved. I believe he cut his quarterback rating against in half. Quarterbacks were about 100 versus the first 3 games. I think they're in the mid-50s in the last 3 games played. The offensive line is like the little train that could. It's just improving a little bit, week to week. And the team has overcome a ton of adversity. I mean, with COVID and injuries, everyone's affected. But how you react and how you play through those things really tell you the value or the worth of a team. And I think that the Steelers may have a pretty good team. People want to badmouth and say what we don't have, but what we do have, we have in spades. And what we do have, I think, may win games later in the season. Just playing together, the ability to prevent points from going on the board, and having, Ben's won a few games over the last 20 years for the Steelers, and if I was an opposing team, I wouldn't want to have the ball with 2 minutes left and a touchdown would beat you, and if even worse, if a field goal can beat you, because Ben just seems to make 1 or 2 plays late in the season that people for the last 5 years say he doesn't have the ability to make.
Yeah, I mean, you can break down his career a lot of different ways, especially at this stage of it. But that thing about having a sort of a knack for making a few plays a game that just win you the game or, make the difference. It's funny, like, the guys who people seem to think they're pretty lucky, and then they're just lucky for their whole careers, despite Ben's, think about how many supporting casts Ben has gone through, how many different kinds of defenses, how many different kinds of, number 1 targets and running games and offensive lines he's had. It's just that part of his game transcends all of those things. It's just who he is. And even though he's not at the absolute peak of his ability, he's still pretty good at what he does, right? So,
and he, if players show a willingness or ability to make plays, I think you see more and more of the youthful, spry, gunslinging Big Ben of the past. Like Fairmouth's touchdown catch, we both had some question marks about him when we drafted him, but he showed an ability to make some plays to the point where I'm becoming a pretty big fan, not only because he has made a couple critical plays, but he's an effort guy too. I think he's going to end up being a little bit better and a little bit more athletic, Keith Miller, and I think he's going to be every bit, if not better, of a blocker. And really, I think he might end up being a steal in the second round. Now, I could not agree with you more about, just look at the number one targets Ben had over the years. Santonio Holmes, Mike Wallace, Hines Ward, Plaxico Burress. He made them all, everybody thought they were there's people, me included, that were saying Antonio Brown might be the second greatest wide receiver in the history of the NFL, the way he was going. You know, AP's a great player. Ben made him great. Ben threw him great. All those receivers can't be great, can't be elite if Ben's not getting the balls in positions to win or make plays. Now, they made plays. Fairmouth made a play for Ben. But after he made that play, I see the youthful Ben come back towards that game. And I was like, this shit is over. If Kohlman and the referees don't fuck us, this is over. Because the man was back in town.
yeah, it's like, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's the sort of, it gets tiresome to have to be your team's running game by extension with these short passes and try to make plays down the field and try to call out to protections. And let's say basically Ben was being asked to do everything. And I think that wasn't fun. Right. So it was
Ben doing that. You had the defense, that was missing some parts, just step up and just thump. And I think they fed off of that home crowd, fed off the Cleveland Browns crowd that was nasty and being filthy. And they also fed off of Ben, and they fed off of that dirty-ass fat bastard Elliott for killing Boswell. The second half of that game, I was like, nobody in the NFL wants to see this Pittsburgh Steelers.
I mean, and to that point, you look around the AFC particularly, and it's like every time a team gets anointed as, they're going to be the clear-cut favorite in the AFC, they've gotten knocked it off this year. It's the Chiefs, and then the Ravens, and then the Chargers, and then the Bills, and then Cincinnati, and it's like, the Raiders. So I kind of feel like, it's not only wide open, there's advantages to playing better later in the year than you played at the beginning, right? Because that's when things start to separate themselves more.
Games matter at the end of the year. Don't get me wrong, the games early in the year matter. But I think that the games later in the season matter a little bit more. Perfect example would be last season. We were on fire early. And then mid-season hiccup, and in the season we limped into the playoffs and caught a beating.
No, given the choice of being, if you get to choose between being great early or great late, always better to be great late.
Right.
Speaking of this point in the season and things we didn't talk about from last week, Mel Ingram got himself traded out of town for a conditional 6th-round pick to theoretically a team that the Steelers are in competition for a wild card spot, possibly. What did you make of that deal? Better to just get rid of him because he was a hostage, or do you think that they didn't? They've done this kind of thing before. Do you feel like that ultimately this is going to benefit them, or won't make a difference, or how are you seeing it?
I think it makes the room better, the locker room. You can't have a turd floating around in the punch bowl And if Ingram was threatening Operation Shutdown, if he wanted out, if he felt lied to and he was going to be subversive, he had to go. If the Steelers got the best thing, the best draft pick, the best value for him that they could get on the market, Corbett did a good job. You just can't have it. I mean, it's the quickest way to and the Steelers, they let James Harrison go. I don't think they had much problems letting Melvin Ingram go.
Yeah, and it's like, from my standpoint, I feel like he was handy to have around when TJ Watt was injured and when Highsmith was injured. So it's not nothing to give away your depth. But
they like to take North Dakota State, and I can only speak from what I read from the media, who I don't trust often, but Taco Charlton's supposed to be just the ultimate teammate. I don't know. He's been around the NFL. I mean, Dallas, Kansas City. I believe there was another stop in between. And he's a young player. I just don't think that he fits well into a lot of schemes. I think he might be specialized as a left outside linebacker for the Steelers. Which what he gives us is what he gives us. But I would rather, go in with what we got that wants to be here and is, rowing the boat in the same direction as the rest of the guys than the guy that just wants to be an anchor, man. And if Ingram didn't want to be here, good luck, go, get out.
I mean, it's a shame, though, because I do think that Ingram offered a little bit more in coverage. He offered a little bit more as a all-around linebacker rather than just a pass rusher.
Better than Taco Charlton is. Taco Charlton didn't play many plays last week. I will say that. But the plays he did play, he was fairly effective. He ain't going to be great rushing the passer, but I'm going to put it this way: he can play the run. He got violent hands.
Yeah, well, we don't complain about that. This is good.
Right? I think that he was. I don't have the exact snap count. I did, and it slips my mind now. But I remember going back and watching it. I thought his snaps were pretty good. You know what I mean? Actually, they were good against them.
Yeah, I'm glad that they are. I mean, to me, I just want them to keep the top two guys fresh, and when they bring in a third guy, whether it's Derek Tusga or Taco Charlton or somebody else, that they, whoever it is that they bring in, that they just offer something for a couple of plays, right? That's really what we're asking. They don't have to be great.
I'll put it this way. Everybody was so scared. 13 personnel for the Browns. 13 personnel. You're going to see those three tight ends. I don't see a tight end in the NFL being able to block Taco Charlton. And if the one thing that he can come in and do is give us good downs, 10, 12, 15 good downs versus the run, get TJ Watt, get Highsmith a blow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's all that we need from that position. I mean, Highsmith is having a better second year than I expected. I think that, Ingram, might have slightly overvalued his work here.
Yeah, I think I'm sure he did, because he sort of overplayed his hand. He could have probably, he probably could have been patient, and he might have seen more as the outside starters got a little bit more worn down by the season or beat up a little bit or whatever. And then you have this fresh guy coming in, making some, name for himself in a contract year. I can see that having been maybe a better strategy for him, but it didn't work out that way. So it is what it is. The other occasion, we're not, the only way we're going to cry over him is if, the Chiefs end up making it to the Super Bowl and we see this, replay of the same thing that's happened with the last couple of times that the Steelers had a disgruntled guy that they gave away for nothing in the season, right? So that's all. Just like, after seeing James Harrison and Antonio Brown's routines and LeGarrette Blount, who all basically did the same kind of thing. So at any rate, we prefer that didn't happen. The other thing that happened was somewhat interesting. Khalil Davis, the twin brother of Carlos Davis. Carlos Davis went on the IR, so we decided to get ourselves another Davis twin. I'm not sure if it'll have any kind of immediate impact, but do you have any thoughts on that deal?
I actually thought that we had the better of the two, but they're athletic kids. You know what I mean? it's hard to say. I'm old school. I like my nose tackle to be a big two-gap. You know, give me Casey Hampton, give me Joel Steed, you know, more than a Kimo Von Oelhoffen, who was a great defensive end for the Steelers. And he played very well as a nose tackle, or a Steve McClendon type. I like the two-gap type of guy. And it's probably the position that I'm the most concerned about. I just, what Khalil Davis offered versus the run, I don't think as much as his brother. And his brother was good, but he wasn't, going to bring to mind Joe Green, Fat Holmes to anyone's mind.
No.
It is what it is. I mean, like Taco Charlton, if he's forced to play, I hope he can give good snaps. And, I mean, that seems like such a chicken shit answer, but, a lot of times you just never know what you're going to get, based upon seeing the jump from the Big Ten to the NFL is a pretty big one. And that's the only thing that you can really go off.
Absolutely, man. So one thing I remember just, in scouting, looking at their tape and when they were in college is I thought Khalil Davis was maybe a little better pass rusher. I actually preferred him as a guy to come up field more of a Javon Hargrave type. But I thought the Carlos Davis at times has shown well, but both of them the same thing. They're both really good athletes, both on the raw side, but they seem like good guys. Cameron Haywood said that they talk and act exactly the same, and it freaked him out a little bit. So maybe that's a good thing. Having twins is on your team is definitely strange. But now that's their third pair of brothers that the Steelers have on their roster right now, which is a little bit weird. That's not something you hear every day. Speaking of their roster, let's look ahead to Monday night's game against the Chicago Bears. Steelers have a chance to win their fourth game in a row. Probably a pretty good chance with the Bears coming to Pittsburgh on a Monday night. Did you see any of the Bears game last week against the 49ers?
I thought the Bears were going to win last week. I actually have gone back and looked at some things. I got to admit, I was a Justin Fields fan. I actually thought Georgia screwed up letting him get away to Ohio State. And I kind of cheering for him. I'm not the biggest fan of their coach, Coach Nagy, or their GM. But the Bears are an organization I always kind of had a soft spot for, just because they've had such bad luck at certain positions.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of felt the way about Justin Fields that I did about most of the guys in last draft class, where everybody was talking about how this was the greatest quarterback class that's ever been seen. And I felt like best case scenario, none of them, with the exception of maybe Mac Jones, was really ready to play right away. That eventually, they might be good players, might not. But I have to say that I wasn't the highest on Justin Fields, because to me, you can choose to be enamored by a guy's running ability. He has great running ability. You could be enamored by the fact that he has good arm and can make plays, but it's the holding the ball and not be really being able to get through his progressions, understand what he's seeing, that stuff. Yes, maybe you can teach the guy that over the course of his career, but some guys just don't have that feel, they just don't have the quick processing, quick decision making, quick release, while they're still, finding their space in the pocket without just taking off and running. And I think in some ways, the new, you can give me your opinion on this. Right now, the big NFL opinion is that if you have guys that can move, that it opens up other possibilities for plays you can run, and it buys them time to learn how to play the game because they can use their wheels. But, I guess the flip side to that is I kind of think guys have that as a crutch, and it keeps them in a way from developing as quarterbacks if they're not really pocket savvy. Which side of the argument do you fall onto?
I am old school. First thing I look for is accuracy. Second thing I look for is smarts. Third thing I look for is arm strength. Fourth thing I look for is athleticism. So I will always favor the more classic drop back passer. Now, don't get me wrong. If the athletic kid is, you know, and is Aaron Rodgers more of an athletic kid or is he more of a drop back passer? You know, it's the question.
Yeah, see, I would say Rodgers and Mahomes have ability to do magical things from just standing in the pocket or moving a little bit, you know, within the pocket to make plays. Like that's where the real magic is with those guys. Now, the fact that they can run on top of that when they need to, fabulous, you know. But if they weren't as good at the other stuff, they wouldn't really get that many opportunities to run the football. That's how I feel.
I agree. I agree with that. How about a perfect example? I'm not the biggest Lamar Jackson fan. I think that he is a special talent. I'm not convinced that he can throw the ball outside the hashes yet. And you're talking about a quarterback that's looking to be the highest paid player in the history of the NFL. I think Baltimore has one of the most difficult contract decisions to make in maybe the history of the NFL because Jackson is super special, more special than Cordell Stewart, who I thought was a special talent quarterback. But boy, you got to be able to throw the ball. If you're even listening for 2021. If you're listening, what quarterbacks would you want to have? You know, Tom Brady's still in the top three. He's a 21-year vet.
Yep.
You got to be in your top three. And he's not real athletic.
Nope. I mean, I just feel like, I've been saying this for a year now, that my main argument against the idea that somehow there's this newfangled NFL type quarterback that if a guy doesn't fit this athletic profile, that you can't even scout him, you can't draft him, whatever. My argument is basically in Lamar Jackson, you have the ultimate version of that, right? You have a guy with a good arm who has unbelievable running talent and has a flair for the big plays at the big time. And I think he's about as good a version of that quarterback as you've ever seen and maybe will ever see. And yet, his career is to this point kind of empty, even in a really good organization, even with traditionally a very good defense and a very good coach. It still hasn't translated into, a big playoff run and a championship or something like that. So I'm just saying, if you can't do it with Lamar Jackson and on that team, I'm just not sure if that bodes well for all the new guys they're talking about bringing in, because at this point, the people in the quote unquote in the know who know not just, hey, I'm giving you my opinion about college prospects, but I hear this from people around the league, like those kind of people. They're only talking about mobile quarterbacks. Like they weren't interested really in the quarterback in New England right now, Mac Jones. They weren't really interested in him last year. They weren't really all that interested in Joe Burrow the year before that. And the guys in this year's class, that are not big movers, they're just like it's just kind of like they don't even want to talk about those guys. Like they're not draftable or they're not a first round pick or whatever. Meanwhile, I'm like I see a guy, I see guys with great passing skills and advanced understanding of the passing game, big arms, who are winning games, with what they're doing and very efficient and accurate, who just the league is not interested in them apparently. It's weird to me, especially because you pretty much, unless you're going to say Aaron Rodgers and Pat Mahomes are quote unquote, athletic athletes playing quarterback, which I don't think anybody can really say that. Unless you're going to say that, basically you got to go back to Steve Young for an NFL champion whose quarterback was essentially a runner who was good in the passing game. And that's a long time ago, man. You'd think this would start to work itself out. But even if you take out Tom Brady out of the equation, they still have Joe Flacco, Eli Manning, Ben Roethlisberger, Drew Brees, Peyton Manning. Like those are the guys who win the Super Bowl.
Eli Manning, twice, yeah. I mean, and that's my point. I mean, when push comes to shove, at this year's draft coming up, whenever they dug into Mac Jones, we'll use him as an example real quick. You find out that he was a junior tennis champion, which seems funny. I don't know how many tennis players that but boy, do they got quick feet. Boy, do they got good balance. Boy, do they move well laterally. And if you think about commanding a pocket in the NFL, you got to have good feet. You got to have quick feet. You got to be able to move laterally. You got to be able to have good balance to up and back in the pocket, step up, pirouette, find different passing angles. It's all footwork. And Mac Jones had it in spades. I'm a Mac Roll fan. You're not. I don't think Mac Roll is going to end up going in the first round. You don't like Carson Strong. I can pretty much guarantee he's going to go in the first round. 6'5", 235, rocket arm, beautiful placement, smart, going to interview well. He's just a damn fine American. He's more American than apple pie.
Okay, but do you think, I'm a fan of both those guys as college quarterbacks, especially Corral, good college quarterback. Do you think either one of those guys is going to be a successful NFL quarterback?
I think Mac Corral is going to end up being a real big surprise in the NFL. He is just mucho, so competitive that I think that he's going to will himself into being a very good NFL quarterback. Because the one thing that I think that he has a better arm than a lot of people think. I think he has outstanding touch and placement. I don't think that Drummond and Mingo are that great. I mean, I love the kid that the Jets drafted, but he was absolute shit before Matt Corral. Elijah Moore. Go look at Elijah Moore with Plumlee beforehand. He was basically used like Percy Harvin because, he's, I don't want to say small, but he's small. And he has short arms, and you've got to get the ball in such a small, finite area for him to make plays vertically in the passing.
Yeah.
Because he's not a super speedster. He's not Cheetah. He's not Tyreek Hill that's going to 4.25 you.
Right.
He's a 4.45 guy that's slippery. He's AB-ish, but smaller. And Crawford's balls on people, man. And then you can go look at a 200-yard rushing performance versus Arkansas where he's getting drilled. I mean, drilled. But he staggers back to the huddle. I think that he has it.
Yeah, see, I buy the competitiveness. It isn't that part of it. I buy that. I just feel like he strikes me a bit like, and I don't mean this to sound like it's not going to sound like a compliment, but I actually, in a way, it is. Sort of like a Mark Sanchez, maybe even Matt Leinart type that are really, super competitive, can do a lot of stuff, and in college they're really good, really good leaders. And in the case of Sanchez, I think was a great fighter. Like he made a lot out of what his talent was. So like if you get like a Matt Sanchez and you give him, Steve Young running kind of skills, like that's sort of where I would put Matt Corral. So like, do I think he can be
top end 3? How about that?
Say again?
I think his top end, his ceiling is going to be a player like Drew Brees.
Yeah, I just don't see the passing. He's not a guy that very good at reading defenses at all. He's like a 1 or maybe 2 read guy in college. I remember seeing Brees in college, and he was pretty close to the guy. I mean, definitely better in New Orleans, quicker, faster, got the ball out faster. But like in the San Diego, Drew Brees, was still pretty much Drew Brees. He arrived from Purdue more or less that way.
Right.
Great teacher.
Joe Tiller is a great who was his coach at Purdue. But what I think goes unnoticed, or a lot of people won't give credit to, is Marty Schottenheimer was a maker of men in a lot of ways. And I think that the Chargers probably benefited Brees a lot more than maybe he will say or he wants to admit, because I remember Drew Brees real well at Purdue too. and it was competitive, but there was a little bit of, I don't want to say mental, like where you could see that it got to him, because Purdue wasn't a great program when he was there. And you
No, he had nothing around him, right?
Right. And, going into San Diego whenever he did, and, overcoming the things he did, and then, everybody thought he was going to basically be Doug Peterson and carry, a clipboard and be around the NFL for 13 or 14 years, but he was never going to be the guy. I think that Marty Schottenheimer, in a way, made him that guy, because I think that he gave Drew Brees a little bit of a drive. People either loved that played for Marty Schottenheimer, either loved or really respected. You're not going to see too many people that hated Marty Schottenheimer, because Marty Schottenheimer could never get it done in the big game, but his players would just lay down and die for him in a way.
Yep.
I mean, he had like a Mike Tomlin type quality.
Yeah, I mean, I can see I see where you're going with the setup for him. I'm very hard on NFL quarterback prospects coming out. I mean, I think I'm harder on them than most, and I do love that. The thing of not just competitive, but the ability to take that competitive fire and translate it into big time throws. To win games when your team needs you. Like that's the thing. Okay, so I have seen Matt Corral make some big plays, and I've watched him a lot, especially this year. I've watched pretty much every game he's played this year. Not sure. I mean, I guess in comparison, like how would you say Justin Fields compares? Bringing it back around to talk about this week's game, how would you say Justin Fields compares to Matt Corral?
I don't see a comparison. What I see a very Pittsburgh comparison is Justin Fields and Cordell Stewart remind me a lot of each other. Big arms, accuracy issues, great athletes, strong. People don't realize how strong Justin Fields is. They look at him, he's a 225-pound man. Mm-hmm. And Cordell Stewart was a 230-pound man. They are both emotionally, I don't want to use the words immature, but they have issues letting go of plays, bad plays, the ability to move on from a bad play and just what you have to do. They struggle with, and when it's going good, it goes really good for them. But when it goes bad, it goes really bad.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I don't know, as it relates to playing Justin Fields this week. Like I think Justin Fields probably played his best game last week that he's played to this point. And for a little while there, it looked like he might even, put them in a position to win. Didn't end up that way. And it kind of felt like as the game went on, there was a little bit more pressure on him to try to make a play to get them back in it. And it didn't go too well from there. But I would say that's less an indictment of him like forever. He'll never be any good because he couldn't come back in this game. And more just like right now, he's not really that guy. But like, I think the Steelers will probably play a lot of contain against him. So I'm not really sure they're going to go after him. And in the past, that's allowed quarterbacks of this type and this level of development to at least at times move the football against the Steelers. How do you think they'll approach defensively playing against Justin Fields at this point?
I don't think we have a linebacker that's fast enough to spy him. You're going to immediately everyone's going to say Devin Bush. We don't have a linebacker fast enough that we can trust to spy him.
Yeah.
So I believe that we are going to have to contain. We're going to definitely have to maintain rush lanes. We're going to definitely have to rush the passer smartly, and we're going to definitely have to, be prepared to two gap, which is dirty words, but Steelers did a lot of it the last couple of weeks, kind of on the sneaky slide. And this would be a perfect ideal week where I think that you might see Tucker Charlton, see more snaps than expected because of his ability to play the run. The Bears are going to run Fields. The Bears are going to run Herbert from Virginia Tech. They're going to run Williams.
Well, Montgomery is supposed to return. So he'd probably
they're going to run Montgomery. I was not certain. I've read that, he's likely to play Monday, and then I read that he's not likely to play Monday.
This is what I hear from Chicago. Our friend Mark Shepard, who's a regular in the Steeler Fury draft, picking for Chicago. He gave me I asked him for what's the latest on the Bears, and he tells me that Montgomery's expected to play. So
he's a dangerous one cut back. I don't know if he's much more dangerous than Herbert or Williams, but it's another weapon for them to use. So I guarantee the Bears are going to be the first team that really, really tests the Steelers' run defense at all three levels. I don't think that Zach Moss for the Bills would, because Josh Allen's a great physical running quarterback as well that we faced week one. I expect the Steelers are going to attempt to play contained. I think they're going to attempt to make Fields throw the ball into small windows, to make multiple reads. I think they're going to try to take away his hots. And, my biggest concern, is the quarterback runs and getting gas in the run game.
Interesting. You think the Bears are in a better position to run the football against the Steelers than the Browns were?
The only reason I say it is because they have the additional threat of the quarterback run, where you really don't have to be too concerned about that with Baker Mayfield. Let's not forget, over the last 5 to 10 years, the Steelers have really had some stinkier performances against quarterbacks running the football. And I mean, other than Lamar Jackson, I mean, they gave up a ton of rushing yards to David Carr, not this year, but in the past. They gave up a ton of yards to Terrell Pryor. I always have concerns with the mobile, fast quarterback because our outside linebackers are coached to hunt, to attack, get upfield. And that can be a dangerous situation, especially, with Justin Fields, who has the ability to really, pick him up and put him down. He's a, 4-4 athlete at the quarterback position. I mean, so in a way I do. I kind of had a feeling that the Cleveland Browns were going to come out and try to street fight the Pittsburgh Steelers in the run game. And I kind of had a feeling that the Steelers were going to be up for the challenge. I think the Bears' run game is not as sophisticated, and I don't think it's as blunt force, but I think that it can really threaten the Steelers in a different way because it can threaten it, to either edge, to the inside or outside down. And that's something that, with linebackers, inside linebackers especially, that have had some issues covering ground and making tackles, that concerns me more than a team attempting to bludgeon us, which I expect the Browns would do in the run game.
Interesting. Yeah, I kind of feel like you're right in the fact that they're going to really be run-centric in this game, both with the quarterback and the running backs. But I also feel like, they had the situation with Allen Robinson. By the way, it's not really a big mystery. You had this poor guy. You think about the quarterbacks that Allen Robinson has had. I feel like, Mark was saying that he thinks, they're going to try to feed him the ball a little bit because he's just A, disgruntled, and B, they know they want to have him be involved more. What do you figure is going on with Allen Robinson in this game?
I mean, the Steelers aren't going to match. But Cameron Sutton has really settled in pretty well. I think they're going to be creative with alignment, so they may try to get them, matched on the slot, so they may try to, draw Millette, or Pierre in coverage. I like Allen Robinson, but he's a guy that I often overlook, and I'm sure the Steelers can't do it. He's big. He's kind of like, I hate to insult Juju, but I think in the same way I think of Juju at times where, he has playmaking ability, but it just, he needs the right type of quarterback. Like if Jay Cutler was the quarterback of the Bears, I'd be far more concerned about Allen Robinson. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I know Jay Cutler is going to get him the ball, or at least target him, 12 to 15 times. And 12 of those 15 targets, I'd say 70% of them might be catchable balls. I can't say the same thing, for Justin Fields. He's just not very accurate. And
no, I think you might actually be able to use, if you know that they really want to try to get Allen Robinson involved and target him, you might be able to sort of use it as a trap, with a guy like Justin Fields.
I'm more concerned about Mooney, to be honest with you, than I am about Allen Robinson for the Bears. Because Mooney actually can take the top off and he can run.
Sure. Yeah.
So if they're effective with their tight end usage with Kohlman, and that's something that the field showed that he was very comfortable with at Ohio State, was throwing the ball to the tight end. Don't get me wrong, Ohio State still does have super talent outside that he was throwing to. There isn't a Chris Olave or a Wilson that can throw the football to the Bears.
Nope.
Those two guys are just freakish athletic. Allen Robinson's not that way, but Mooney kind of is. He's just not blessed with the greatest hands, and he's not a great route runner.
And he's little, but yes.
Right.
He reminds me a little bit of sort of like John Brown, but with like a slightly bigger, like a little bit more muscular, like more physical John Brown, I guess is the way I would put it.
Fair comparison.
I don't know if he's really that small, but he feels skinny and kind of small on the small side to me.
I think he's like 5'11"-ish, 185, so he's a little bit taller, but he's wiry.
Yeah, John Brown is not that big, but yeah, he just feels a little like you could be physical with him and it might help you. I guess is what I would say. Let's talk about the other side of the ball for a second. Steelers offense and the Bears defense. I guess Mac is not going to play. That's the latest, or the word, at least for right now. It doesn't look like it.
It's minor.
Yeah, Hicks and Goldman not themselves still, according to Mr. Shepard. Quinn playing well, but doesn't really expect pressure to be an issue. For the Steelers. How do you see our young offensive line shaping up in this matchup where their defensive line's got some issues?
We're going to get to test the FC theory about the Steelers offensive line in the 3-4 again this week. The Bears are pretty stout. Their 3-man front is pretty damn big. They have one super athletic inside linebacker, another pretty athletic inside linebacker, and Robert Quinn and Mac coming off the edge. It's pretty nasty. Mac doesn't look like he's going to play. I am concerned about Robert Quinn. He is just a beautiful technician at this point, a very grizzled vet that still has athletic ability, and he can give our tackles issues. I think that Dan Brown, God love him, he's a right tackle. He really is, but he's not doing horribly at left tackle.
Dan Moore. Yeah. Yeah,
excuse me, Dan Moore Jr. Who week after week he had his issues with Myles Garrett. He didn't get put on his keister like other tackles have, but he continues to improve.
I feel like he overset a little bit because he didn't want to make the highlight reel of getting knocked over on his butt. He would rather have given up the edge than, like he basically was like, I'm going to take this thing away from you. You are not bull rushing and knocking me over. And if I'm a little late to the outside, that's okay. At least I know I have to cheat that way or something. But yeah, that's what my perception was anyway.
The hardest thing for a tackle to adjust to. And if he does make that adjustment, then he is going to be able to stay at left tackle, and he's going to be very Marvell Smith-ish, which everybody in Pittsburgh would be thrilled with. And if they're not, they're crazy. The Steelers are going to have to stick with the double teams. There is some match that play for the Bears, and it's just not three defensive linemen. They rotate 6 big bodies, and it doesn't matter if it's the gargantuan Canadian. Doesn't. I have fear. I actually have fear that the Steelers are not going to be able to run the ball, and they're going to continuously attempt to run the football. I think that the Steelers are going to have to loosen them up with the passing game. And they're going to have to show some belief in the receivers to make plays and for the offensive line to hold up. And the Steelers didn't give a ton of help to either tackle against the Browns. They chipped at times, on obvious passing downs they would, but they let the tackles out there on islands, and I don't think that either one of them were horrible, especially, Myles Garrett. Love him or hate him, he's definitely a top 5 pass rusher in the NFL.
Sure.
Most likely top 3. So,
you stole my thunder a little bit. You stole my thunder a little bit, Dom, because that's exactly what I was going to say, is that my fear, like having watched the Bears against San Francisco, for instance, the 49ers, the only reason they had any success running in the interior of that defense is that they were running Elijah Mitchell, who's super quick and could get through those tiny gaps in a hurry. But I don't think the Steelers have that kind of interior run game. So to me, it's like the way, if the Steelers are going to have any hay, they're going to have to adjust to running the ball on the edges a little bit more, or running screen passes on the edges, or to Najee or something, because I think this is my biggest fear in the game, is that, just like you said, that they'll have trouble running it the way they've been running it in the interior, and yet they will continue to do that despite the fact they're not getting the results out of it. And meanwhile, the Bears, one thing that they have not shown that they're very good at is linebacker coverage. So, you have tight ends in the game and you throw it to them a little bit to loosen things up. I think that could make a big difference in this game.
Dr. Harris isn't too bad in the passing game either. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's like you don't have to run them up the middle to get them touches and to get that part of your game going.
I actually would prefer not to. I would prefer he has Marshall Faulk type talent, and I'd try to use him like Marshall Faulk. Now he's not going to be able to run the sweep the way that Marshall Faulk did, but he can be used in the passing game, and he's definitely more of a threat in the interior run game.
Yeah, and it's like the Steelers' offensive line right now. I still feel like, especially Moore is so much better in the run game than he is as a pass protector. Like, he's been sufficient as a pass protector to get the job done,
right.
But he's been killing guys in the run game. Oh my goodness, So, like, you look at guys like Green and Dotson and Moore in the run game. I think you can understand why they want to run it some. But we'll see how they do again. It's a good test for them in the interior because they've been playing well and run blocking well. But yeah, this thing about getting feeling like you have to force the run in order to accomplish things with the run game is just so backwards to me, because it's like, yeah, you have to find your opportunities to run and not forget about it. But you also can't run into stacked fronts and into, if you're not having success with it, you have to loosen them up. You have to do something to expect a different result later. So yeah, this is always been my complaint. It's like, I want them to run and be very successful running, but I feel like good teams run in spots. They get 2/3 of their runs are at times when you're not expecting them to run, or you're worried about what they're doing in the pass game, or you're not expecting the misdirection or whatever. Like, that's 2/3 of every NFL team's run game. Unlike the Steelers or maybe the Browns, or like these more traditional run teams. But I feel like there's more than one way to get your run game going, I guess is what I would say.
Completely agree.
Yeah, I was going to say, I didn't give you anything to say because you agree with me. Anything else in terms of this matchup before we move on that we should talk about that I haven't mentioned?
Turnovers, ball protection, ball security in this type of game. I mean, the Steelers can't afford to turn the ball over, make stupid mistakes, stupid mental errors.
Yeah, like they've pretty good ratio this year. I think they only have one more turnover than they've taken away, but they haven't really taken away very many turnovers. I mean, they basically, knock on wood, haven't really thrown, many interceptions, and they haven't fumbled a lot, but they aren't really getting much from their defense either. Although, you could argue that the last two games were really about the turnovers that were created.
Hey, Joe Schobert, welcome to Pittsburgh.
Amazing to take a play from practice and say, oh, I remember this thing in practice. He used to be a little loose with the ball. That's the best. And then, I don't know if you saw it, but someone found a clip from NFL Network's coverage. They barely cover training camp, but they were covering the Browns training camp a few years ago. And he had a very similar play, almost the same route. Schobert came from behind kind of in a similar way and knocked the ball out almost at exactly the same point. It was like practice makes, perfect in the game, right?
Correct.
Play like you practice. Right on. Yes, we're going to try to avoid the turnovers when we have the ball, and we're going to try to get turnovers when we don't have the ball. That's always a good thing. I'm not going to complain. Let's move on to our illustrious pick segment, brought to us by.
Oh my God, Mike Ferrer is terrible. And the only thing that's worse than Mike Ferrer is Joe Buck. And possibly the only thing worse than Mike Ferrer and Joe Buck is Chris Collinsworth. We'd also like to thank Chico Bail Bonds and Jeremy's little plug, which we will still give at
8:30 a.m. in Los Angeles, 8:30 a.m. radio in Los Angeles, airing at 10:30 a.m. on Sunday mornings Eastern Time. The Extra Point. That's the show.
Hopefully the Steelers can kick this week. Jesus.
Speaking of extra points, I'd also like to send out the show sponsorship to the targeting rule in college football, just since Perch isn't here. Let's talk a little bit. We talked a little bit about quarterback prospects. We're going to talk about three of them, two different games where three of them are playing, or actually four of them are playing, this weekend. The first one is a little bit out of nowhere. Wake Forest traveling a very short distance to Chapel Hill to play North Carolina. And this features two quarterbacks I think are kind of interesting. If you're into last year and at this time and what it seemed like, Sam Howell, certainly seemed like, or is it Sam Howell for North Carolina?
North Carolina.
Yeah, would seem to be a pretty good candidate to be maybe even the first quarterback taken. Hasn't really lived up to that expectations this year. And then the Wake Forest quarterback Sam Hartman, right? I think I got him right. He's a little bit undersized, kind of like Howell, a little bit undersized, but aside from the size, pretty good looking quarterback. And he's got Wake Forest in a position where, I'm not so sure they wouldn't get jumped over by teams that are beneath them, even if they continue to win. But, you're an ACC team and you're undefeated. You're in the conversation at least. North Carolina is a favorite in this game. What do you think happens in this matchup with two good quarterbacks meeting in a big conference type game?
E.T. Perry is a wide receiver from Wake Forest has really caught my attention. The reason that I know anything about these two teams is because I do play daily fantasy sports. Sam Hartman got some Jake Plummer to his game where he just doesn't. He looks like he should be teaching civics, high school civics, and not being an NFL quarterback. But I think he's going to be a future NFL quarterback. Don't know if he's going to be a great starter or even a starter, but he's solid. I think Wake Forest can actually outscore North Carolina. I think it's going to be a big score. I think Wake Forest is going to end up winning by a field goal, maybe by a touchdown.
Yeah, I kind of like Wake Forest as well for the upset. Although to your point about them having to outscore North Carolina, they very well might have to because it's Wake Forest defense. I don't know, not quite the solid defense that you might expect from the number 8 team in the country. But I like Wake Forest in this game. Just North Carolina, I felt peaked last year, and so this year is sort of like anytime they meet some resistance, it hasn't been very good for them. But I'm looking forward to see that. It'll be a nice game to watch just to be able to see some quarterback prospect play. I'm not a big fan of the smaller guys unless they're just, really show you something. But I do agree with you that I feel like, Wake Forest quarterback has a little juice. Like I could see him having a career in the NFL, whether he's a starter or not. The other big quarterback matchup is Liberty in pretty much its, prove it game, traveling to Oxford, Mississippi to play Ole Miss. This is interesting. I'll tell you what I find interesting about this game. I'll go first. I'm interested that the point spread is only 8.5 points for Ole Miss, because I think if you look at the way Liberty's played this year, especially on defense, and even the inconsistency of their offense, going to an SEC team that's a pretty good SEC team and only getting 8.5 points, I feel like that's a sign this game might be closer than you would think on paper. I know you're a big fan of the Ole Miss quarterback, but I'll tell you, Malik Willis to me is sort of like a compact version of Randall Cunningham, and I'm not sure if he has the sort of the NFL acumen that Randall Cunningham developed into, like if he'll get to that level. But in terms of the ability, the raw ability, I think he has that. And he showed me something. I can't remember. I think it was at the last game Liberty played where they got down. Their defense was making mistakes, and he guys were dropping the ball. It was just one of those games where you don't really think it's now so far out of hand that Liberty's not going to have a chance to win the game. And he just sort of willed them to the win. And it wasn't against a very good opponent, so it's not a test like that. But I feel like it's going to be a very entertaining game. I like Liberty in the points, probably not to win this game. And secret low-key problem for Liberty is I don't think much of their coaching. The coaching decisions that were made in their game against Syracuse cost them heavily, cost them a little bit against App State and their other loss. So not really thinking their coaching is going to win them a lot of momentum in this game, despite the fact that it's a return to Mississippi for Hugh Freeze. What do you think about this?
Finally about the return to Mississippi for Hugh Freeze. That's what I was going to get at.
Do I have the right coach?
You absolutely do. Hugh Freeze was fired. He had some sanctions or some questionable things at Ole Miss. Then they hired Matt Luke, who they fired a little bit early, in my opinion, who has gone on to be the offensive run coordinator at the University of Georgia. And now they decided to go with a classy coach after they got rid of Matt Luke. They went with Lane Kiffin. Get your popcorn. I think Ole Miss wins like 45-41. So I completely agree with you about taking the points. Ole Miss's defense is very comparable to Wake Forest. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But this game is going to mean a ton to Liberty just because, and I actually kind of sort of like Hugh Freeze. He is a little bit too much of a riverboat gambler, and he will do some silly, stupid shit, like maybe get their kicker fucking killed. Oh, no, that's the Steelers. I think that Ole Miss will have too much, but I think that Liberty definitely will stay with them.
Well, I'll say this also, Malik Willis was a guy that was, at Auburn in the SEC and didn't really get a shot there. So, I mean, from the standpoint of like he's got something to prove in this game, if he comes in this game and he goes in there and has a great game and beats Mississippi, I think it's millions of dollars for him. On the other hand, that's a lot of pressure. Maybe that pressure is too much considering the team that he's got around him. And the other thing, though, is he hasn't really run that much this year compared to previous years. He did it when they were behind and they really needed some plays. He ran a bit more and had some big plays running it. But that's the thing I'd look for in this game. I will bet you that there's a very good chance that he is the leading rusher for Liberty on Saturday. And if he is, that's probably a pretty good sign for them staying in the game. I guess let's move on and talk about some pro game this week. There's not a ton of amazing matchups for the NFL this week, but there are a couple of interesting games. Do you want me to throw some at you, or do you want to talk about anything in particular? How about the Browns and Bengals? I mean, you got both teams coming off a disappointing loss. But I feel like it's an important game for both teams. A little bit hard to figure what might happen. What do you see happening in this game?
Wow. If you would ask me this 2 weeks ago, I would definitely have jumped all over the Bengals. The Bengals' run defense has really disappeared the last 2 weeks. I'm going to put my money on Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase to score one more touchdown than the Browns. The Browns are going to take a field goal, and I think that Chase and Burrow will get it done. So I'll take the Bengals 30-27.
I think the Bengals are sort of an example of when you have weaknesses on your team, they eventually will cost you.
Sure.
And I think there's still some issues with their offensive line, particularly in the interior. So I'm not sure that I think that hurt them a little bit last week. But this run defense thing, I'm not sure either one of these teams is really, the run defense that they maybe were earlier in the year. They both look like they've had it. I was pretty much ready to pick Cleveland in this game just because I feel like it's a game where what's his name? Baker Mayfield, 5-1, I think, against the Bengals in his career. It's sort of like picking Ben and the Steelers against Cleveland. It usually works out pretty well for you. And I guess I'm still going to pick Cleveland. But I'm not at all convinced with all the mayhem that's going around their facility right now with this whole Odell Beckham thing and other factors. Speaking of, you say that Lamar Jackson's contract is going to be a real, tough call for Baltimore. What about Cleveland's, with Baker? I feel like their fan base is in love with Baker Mayfield. And if the team makes a sort of a business decision that, hey, he's a good guy and he got us out of the doldrums, but we don't really think he's the guy to win us championships, and they decide to move on, I'm not sure the fan base is really going to deal very well with that. So anyway, that's what I think. What do you make of the Odell Beckham situation and Baker's contract?
I think that the Browns have to move on from Beckham. And as funny as it sounds, I pick up the option on Baker Mayfield, and I might get Dak Prescott on him from there. Meaning, if he shows that he's worth it, I might have to franchise. And I know that might, put me in some cap hell, but I think that with the Browns letting Beckham go, I think that you basically are locked into having to keep Mayfield for at least another year. And if you do have to franchise Mayfield the next year, at least you'll have Beckham Jr.'s contract off the books.
Mm-hmm.
But it is an ugly situation.
Yeah, I mean, that's just that quarterback purgatory, man. Quarterback that's pretty good, but not really good enough to be a difference maker to win championships. Because you got to pay him. That's the thing. You got to pay him either way. So, yeah, that's not a good situation. But, I'm glad it's someone else's not a good situation, frankly. Speaking of which, let's move on from their situation to our situation as we talk about our 5-star matchup. It's a healthy 3.5 stars anyway. Your Chicago Bears coming to Pittsburgh to play on Monday night against Pittsburgh Steelers. Tell me about your prediction for what you think is going to happen this week's game.
To quote our illustrious partner, Perch, I think the Steelers are going to blow them out and win by a field goal.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think Mike Kohlman owns pharmaceutical stocks and blood pressure medicine, because I think the Steelers could actually come out with an aggressive passing game plan, play action pass, where they could probably get up by 3 touchdowns in this game. And honestly, cruise, they're not going to do it. They're going to do what they're going to do, and we're going to run inside zone, and we're going to run inside zone. Then we're going to try to get the first down on third down. If that's, we're going to punt and play good defense, rinse and repeat. So I'll take the Steelers like 23-20 in a game that should honestly probably be 35-13.
Yeah, for much the same reasons, it's hard to play the score game in this one. I think they might not cover a game that they win comfortably, it's kind of a different way of saying the same thing. They're 8.5 point favorite. I could see them winning by 8. Maybe I will call it 24-16, something along those lines for the Steelers. But I'm going to keep my fingers crossed. I'm not betting on the Steelers to put up a lot of points until they prove to me that they can do it. But I do think the pieces are sort of falling in place where it could happen, because, as you said, once Ben is sort of energized, the guys are making plays, and he knows he can sort of trust them. And it looks like they're able to run the ball a little bit, even if they don't have great success against Chicago. The last few weeks they've been able to run it. Maybe that inspires some confidence to mix it up a little bit more and to push the envelope more on the offense than they have to this point. It's like, hey, we can trust our offensive line to do a little bit more, so let's do a little bit more. Defensively, I think they probably won't be able to completely shut down Justin Fields running the football. There's just too much space to cover, and he's too good an athlete for that. But I don't really fear him throwing the ball in a way that makes big plays to beat the Steelers consistently. Don't see that happening. I'm not sure there'll be a big pass rush game, but I think it could be a game where some defensive backs could make plays on the ball with some inaccuracy and with rushing throws or making off-platform throws. So still like the Steelers to win this game and maintain their position moving upward in the AFC. And then, after this week, we'll go from there. I'll throw it to you for a last word. What do you got to say for yourself?
If you're going to decide to have a few drinks, get Lyft, get Uber. Don't get in your new Corvette and do 155 miles per hour and kill somebody. What were you fucking thinking, Henry Ruggs, there? Jesus. All that money, all that talent, and poof. There's no excuse.
Yeah, and it's worse because, the NFL will provide all NFL players have a phone number they can call, and a ride will show up for them. No questions asked, no matter when or what. So it's like you even have that available to you. I heard something interesting today. Someone talking about that things like CTE, not necessarily that, post-concussion type brain injuries, that one of the consistent symptoms are, risk-taking, thoughtless risk-taking, kind of, for lack of a better way of putting it. And it just sort of feels like it's one thing to drive after you've had some drinks. It's another thing to drive really fast in the city. But to start to do to the extent that he did with what he had to work with what the situation is, man, that's beyond even bad decision making. That's into the range of it's one of the worst examples of it that I can think of ever hearing about, really. I'm just very sad for somebody who was just out, for whatever reason, driving normally with their dog in the car, driving somewhere, and it did nothing to merit ending up the way that it did. So I will echo your sentiments, which are as usual on point. Cautiously optimistic. That's my word for this week. Let's keep the fingers crossed. Hey, it's Monday night. It's a night game at home, wearing the Color Rush uniforms. And the only time they've ever lost wearing those uniforms, they got Scrooby-Dooby-Dooed by the officials. Jesse caught it, in case you're wondering. But let's have a conversation next week on this show, FC, after a Steelers victory. Once again, thanks to Dom, a.k.a. FC, for carrying the rock this week. You were like Najee Harris, staying in the game for all the reps. And also to SteelPerch and Jeremy Kohlman, who couldn't be with us tonight. And for all of you who listen and are on the website, SteelerFury.com. Hey, if you listen, hit the like button, subscribe, leave us a review. All these things are extremely motivational to us to keep going with this thing and to try to keep the show the best it can be. So thank you for listening, and thank you for letting us know about it. And in the meantime, I'm Wil Masisak, a.k.a. Bradshaw to Ben, a.k.a. Accidental Zen. On behalf of Dom, I'm saying, go get them, Steelers.
Go Steelers.
Steeler Fury.